listen to some food for thought as well. And in regard to that, I wasn't here last year when you had the church tea. And I was told it went really well. He said it was great. We had someone gave their story about how they became a Christian. And then I think Dave Lewis sort of finished off. So that's basically what we're going to do tonight. Now, I've invited James. James and Sheila recently came into membership here. So we had the privilege of hearing how James became a Christian. But I thought it'd just be so useful, so helpful. So if it's okay, James, I'm going to drop you right in at the deep end. But just to say, we'd love to hear tonight your story about how you came to Christ. So thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you actually hear me? Okay, yeah. Basically, before I came to know Christ, I wasn't brought up in a Christian family. I was brought up in a moral family, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But I wasn't brought up in a Christian family. I myself classed myself as an atheist, specifically a Darwinian, evolutionist, atheistic, down to the core. I didn't believe in any such thing as a deity. I didn't believe in any such thing as a God. Material, what you could see, what you could touch, that's all there was. Or at least that's what I thought. I held this view for really as far back as I could actually remember. Especially as I kept getting deeper into science, I realized that my view continued to get stronger and stronger and stronger. There's actually one occasion I can remember that when I was in my RE class, everybody was told to draw the 6 days of creation. I remember in a little act of rebellion, I decided to draw the Big Bang and the order of everything that I thought. But it wasn't until college that my best friend got saved 1 month before me. And he kept telling me that he'd met this guy. He didn't tell me that he was a Christian because he knew my view. He also knew that I would argue back with Christians often. I loved a good debate. I loved debating Christians and trying to actually rip them down. It wasn't just Christians, it was virtually anyone who believed in a deity or anyone who believed in a God. But one day, my friend came up to me and he asked if I was doing anything that day. I was saying, no, I'm free that night. So he said, well, why don't you come over and meet this guy who, because I've been telling him so much about you and he really wants to meet you. So I was like, yeah, okay. He didn't tell me he was a Christian, or if he did, he kind of whispered it. Just kind of kept that undercover. So I ended up going that night. And this guy was absolutely lovely. Like, he was absolutely a great guy. But I remember we went into the living room. And I can't remember how exactly it happened, but he started telling me all about Jesus. All about what Christ did for us on the cross, how we were sinners. And this time I didn't argue back, which absolutely baffled me. I just sat there for 2 hours just taking this in as he just ran through the entire gospel. I remember halfway through I tried to buff up a bit and say, well, what about evolution? And then he just looked at me and went, you know that's not true. And then I remember going, yeah, that's true. So I just completely shot down my worldview in like a few seconds. But I remember towards the end of that conversation, my mum got in touch with me and came to pick me up from the house. And when I got into the car, I was just absolutely silent because I felt peace. I felt this peace that I just could not explain at all. And I didn't know what was happening. I remember my mum was asking me, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm just thinking. But when we got back to the house, I went straight upstairs. I saw my brother and one of my good friends sitting on the bed. And my good friend looked at me and said, without me saying a single word, he said, what's happened to you? Change back. I remember looking at him and saying, I think I'm a Christian. Because I had no idea what a Christian truly was. No clue. I remember that was the first time I went then into my room. I started praying for the first time ever. Now, it wasn't even, not that long ago, I learned that that my friend had actually, my best friend, had actually told this other guy when I went in, don't preach the gospel to him. He's an atheist. Don't talk about it. And I'm so glad he ignored that. I'm so glad he ignored that, because thanks to him telling me Christ, it finally, the light went on. Because I'd heard the gospel before, when I debated people, I heard people on the street, people coming to the house, etc. So I'd heard it, but it never made sense. I'd always fought back, argued back, instantly responded to what was being said. But that was the first time that it made sense. All of it made sense. Even though I hadn't read the Bible, had never even picked up a Bible, it made sense. And also apparently, I can't remember this neither, but apparently the day after I got converted, I non-stop, because I used to walk to college with my friend every day. When we were walking there, apparently I non-stop talked about Jesus. Non-stop, straight off the bat. To the point they phoned the other guy and said, I think he's saved. I don't know how to explain it, but I think he's saved. And both of them just couldn't understand it whatsoever. But yeah, that's how I came to know Christ. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you ever so much, James. Thank you. Don't go. Anyone got any questions for James? Maybe you're not a Christian tonight. Maybe you got some questions. Anyone got a question for? You're hoping no one's got a question. Okay. Well, if you want to chat to James afterwards, you'll be around afterwards. Yeah. But thank you very much. Really appreciated hearing that. And again, maybe you're someone here tonight, a little bit new to Christianity, you're not really sure what to make of that. But I suppose at the end of the day, you can't get your head around the fact that something very sudden and very dramatic happened to James. I think I'm right in saying, James, nobody was more surprised than yourself. And we've known James for a while and seen this is not a 9-day wonder, flash in the pan or anything like that, but God has worked and has continued to work. And it's a reminder that when someone becomes a Christian, there really is a really major transformation. And I want to wind up tonight, really, just by reading to you something that Jesus once said. It's a story. Now, we all like stories, right from the very youngest to the oldest. And this is a great story that Jesus told. But it comes as a result of a challenging question. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I've no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" And then Jesus concluded with these words, "This is how it will be for anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God." Sort of building on that just for a few moments, let me ask you a question. Are you rich towards God? That's the challenge, isn't it, of that story. The fella in the story has hit the jackpot. We might say he'd won the lottery. I think would be a kind of modern day equivalent. And he suddenly got this challenge. What am I going to do with my wealth? So I wonder if suddenly someone gave you, let's say, £10 million. What would you do with it? Any of the children here, what would you do? What would be the first thing you'd do?
I'd buy a huge mansion.
Oh, you'd buy a huge mansion. You could have loads. You wouldn't just have to buy one. Yes, what would you do? A Nintendo Switch. Great, absolutely. Anyone else, what would you do? Well, go on then, we'll take one more, yeah? What a lovely idea. You'd have a stables to teach children how to ride horses. What a fantastic idea. Well, I'm sure every now and then you've had that little dream. Well, if I was really rich, what would I do? Probably if you're in work, the first thing you'd say, well, I wouldn't go into work on Monday, or I just quit. And you'd have all these ideas, a holiday in the Maldives, I don't know, something like that. You have all these sort of ideas. That's what's going on in this story. Now, the guy in the story is a hard-working fella. He's a farmer. And, you know, farmers don't get wealthy without hard work. So he's an honest, hard-working chap. He's got this bumper harvest. And he's basically reckoning on the fact that now life is going to be so much easy. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. I suppose for a lot of folks, and maybe you're a bit like this tonight, I don't know. And if you are, it isn't a criticism. It's just being honest about where we are as people. Maybe that's really the very best you can hope for in life. You think to yourself, well, to be in a situation like that, or maybe I can retire from work on a good pension, or maybe some money would come my way, or I could find myself in a situation where I wouldn't have to worry about all this stuff, and I could just enjoy life. Maybe that's your ultimate aspiration. Perhaps you're a young person here tonight doing exams at the moment, and you say, well, I grind it out, I'll get these grades, I'll go to uni, I'll get a decent job so that I can earn a good salary, and then life will be great. Jesus is telling us in this story, don't set your sights so low. There is something far better. And it's more than just being far better. If you don't have this, then you're lacking something absolutely crucial and vital in your life. So what is the thing we're lacking? Well, in the story, Jesus says, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. We kind of all know that's true, don't we? It is, isn't it? And yet we live in a society here in Wales, it's a materialistic society where quite often the car you drive, the job you have, where you go on holiday, the clothes you wear, and all that sort of thing, that's by and large how people value and work out where they are on the social order. And Jesus is saying, there's more to life than this. There really is. And that really is the challenge of Christianity, isn't it? I'm not sure if it was Chekhov who wrote a little short story. I remember reading it years ago. I think it was Chekhov. Wrote a short story, How Much Land Does a Man Need? And it tells a story of a village where there was a competition for a piece of land. In fact, I think it was a dispute over the land, and they decided to settle it by a race between two individuals. And the race was to go right round the village, and I think they had to go around several times, and it was quite a tough race, a running race. And so off they went. And one of them guys eventually starts to pull ahead. And he keeps going, and he keeps going, and he absolutely drives himself into the ground, and he wins, and he finishes. And he's won this parcel of land. And he's thinking about all the things that he can do as he's running with this land. But now it's his. But the minute he finishes, in Chekhov's story, he drops down dead. And the ironic twist at the end is, how much land does a man need? Well, it's enough to be buried in. You might say that's a bit morbid, but in a way, that's the reality. And Jesus in this story is getting us to face the reality by kind of stripping everything else away and saying all the stuff we work for, all the stuff that we worry about, all the things that we look forward to, at the end of the day, they don't really matter. There's something more important. And the more important thing is this. And this is the very last thing Jesus said. I wonder if you remember this. He speaks about this man. The moment he says, take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry, God said to him, you fool, this night your life will be demanded from you. And then Jesus said this, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich towards God. And that's that question I asked you, isn't it? Are you rich towards God? Maybe you sat there tonight saying, what in the world is he on about? What does that mean, to be rich towards God? Well, it's clearly very important, isn't it? And it's speaking about that something extra, the other in life, the thing that money can't buy. And what is that? It's a relationship with God. It's the very thing James was speaking about. As he was telling us, he was proud of his atheism, proud of his own ideas, proud of his own thoughts, until God got hold of him and drew him to himself. And do you remember as James was speaking, how he told us that happened? It was as he discovered who Jesus Christ is and what Jesus Christ has done. That's what makes the difference. So how can we be rich towards God? It's by coming to know Christ. Now, church is great. Hopefully you're having a lovely time here this evening. This is church. It's God's people meeting together like this. But Christianity ultimately isn't about this. It's about Christ. It's about coming to know him. And the Bible tells us some key things about Jesus, the one who told this story. You say there have been loads of interesting storytellers on the face of this planet. Chekhov was one of them. There are a whole host of them. We've got some good ones in Wales over the years. So why is Jesus so special? And the answer is that the Bible makes it clear he is both God and man. God and man. I imagine over the years when before James was a Christian, many of his arguments against Christianity would have been arguments against what we refer to as the supernatural. Those stories in the gospel of Jesus walking on the water, turning water into wine, healing the sick. You say, that just doesn't happen. No one can walk on water. But Jesus is God and man. He can speak to winds and waves and they are silent. He can raise the dead. So when we hear of him being arrested and placed on a Roman cross, we find ourselves saying, well, what in the world is going on? Here is God, here is the one who is both God and man being put to death. You know, as a little kid growing up, Good Friday we call it, isn't it, when we remember Jesus' death. And I used to think that was such a wrong name for that day. How can it be good when Jesus is being put to death? How can anything good come out of that? But the reason it's good is this, that Christ tells us that he'd come into the world for that very hour, because by his death, he makes it possible for us to know God. You see, the reason you don't know God tonight is that there's a barrier that exists between you and God. It was in James's life, it was in mine, it's in the life of every person who's become a Christian. And we need this barrier to be taken away. We can't do it ourselves. A lot of people try, by the way. They think if I pray a lot, if I do a lot of good stuff, or if I come to church, somehow that'll get rid of this. It doesn't work. There's only one way for this barrier to come away, to be taken away. And it's that God himself removes it. And that's why Jesus died on the cross. He made it possible for that barrier that God calls sin to be forgiven and removed and taken away. So are you rich towards God? Do you know Christ? Have you discovered something in Christ that is more precious than anything that this world can offer you? Winning the lottery, retiring on a decent pension, rediscovering your health, having a decent family around you, even better than these things. There is something much, much more in Jesus Christ. And I want to leave you with this tonight. He is the God you are looking for. And I really believe he's more willing to meet with you than you can ever imagine. He came into the world so that we might know God. He went to that cross and suffered in agony so that the barrier of our sin might be taken away. And he was raised from the dead that we might have new life. Reach out to him. Call out to him. Talk to him. Trust him. And you will be rich towards God. Well, if you're here tonight, and maybe this is all a bit new, I just want to say we are so glad that you're here, and we would love to talk to you some more about this. And if you've got questions, particularly if you want to chat to James or myself, we're here. If you just want to talk and say, I don't want you to say anything, I want you just to listen to me, we'll do that. But we're here to help you. If we can do anything at all to point you in the direction of Jesus Christ, who has changed our lives and made them so wonderful. So, we've kind of come to an end formally now, but there's still cake. And please don't feel you have to rush away. And it's just so good to see you. Thank you for coming tonight. God bless you. Thank you.